Hello, family and friends. Here we are again. Remember I told you last week, I finished in 6, that we kind of skirted with the two prophets, or people that give testimony of God in chapter 11. So we're going to go there and finish up that chapter and then go back. I want to make sure we're not going to do Revelation chronologically, like one chapter. We have this recently, but I want to do it by event. If you do it by event, it's easier to understand because the chapters run right into the first 3.5 years and then the second 3.5 years of something happening in that same chapter. We won't do that. We're just going to go to the first 3.5 years and learn everything that's going to happen then, and then we'll go into the last 3.5 years. Okay, so let's go to Revelation chapter 11, verses 1 and 2. And God says, "And there was given me," this is to John, "a reed like unto a rod. And the angel stood saying, Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and them that worship therein." So he's got to also count the people. "But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall be tread underfoot 42 months. Okay, I'm great the way he uses this. It's 42 months here in verse 2, which is actually 3.5 years. And then he says in chapter 3, and also I like the way he's not told not to measure that where the Gentiles are. That just goes to show you too that this whole thing is actually for the Jew. Okay? John's a Jew, of course, and he's doing the things and writing this whole book really for the Jewish believer. And so the part that's under the Gentiles, he isn't even supposed to measure. Okay? Now we get to chapter 3, and it says, "And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth." Now remember, the first word before they said 42 or 40 and 2 months, 3.5 years. Now 1,260 days is 3.5 months. So all of it, the Gentiles will be brought on the outer court 3.5 years, and the witnesses are going to witness 3.5 years. Okay. Now we go to verse 4, and these are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before God, or standing before the God of the earth. What it's actually telling us here is these 2 witnesses, they're going to be powered by a power from God, which is those olive trees. Remember, this word candlestick could have been translated lamps, anything that gives light. Okay. The reason they're giving the olive trees is they're letting us know that they're doing it either through God's power or their own, because olive trees, they used to take olives and squish them and get the oil, and the oil which they would use to burn in the lamps. So their power is coming from that, and candlesticks, of course, show the light, shining the light of God. So their power is coming from God, and the shining of the light is all coming from God to these 2 witnesses. Okay. "And if any man will hurt them," verse 5, "fire will proceed out of their mouth and devour their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed." So the way they're going to kill them, when people come to hurt them, is fire out of their own mouths. Okay. In other words, they're going to burn them alive. Okay. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of people that are going to be standing up on the court, on the mount, okay, preaching this message for 3.5 years. When we get into this more, we'll see these 2 messages a little more, even though this one goes through the whole thing and they die. They'll talk about them still more in Revelations, how that they had preached continually, night and day. One would sleep, the other one would keep on preaching. Their voice never stops for 3.5 years. Okay? And remember, this is all going on at the same time the horsemen are being in chapter 4, what's going on in Israel, or on the earth. That's it, the horsemen and everything. This is going on, like I said, in Jerusalem. One's the earth, the other one is the city, okay? And later on we'll see what's going on in heaven.
Okay, I have a question though.
Yes.
You said the fire comes out of their mouth and kills them. Is it the witnesses that kill their enemies, or it sounded like they killed them?
Comes straight out of the witnesses.
Yes. Okay, and kills their enemies.
They're killing their enemies. If they come to hurt them, fire comes out. Now people are all around them listening to this too. Okay, but they'll know those that are coming, and as soon as they get close enough that they're away from everybody else to hurt them, they're going to kill them. Okay? They're going to be incinerated. Okay. 6. These have power to shut up heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, 3.5 years. and have power over waters to turn them to blood, to smite the earth with all plagues, as often as they will. Now, we can stop here for a minute and talk about, remember I said last time, there's always been conversation about who these two witnesses are. Now, we know Elijah has to be one because he's foretold in the Old Testament that he was coming back. Remember, we saw that last time too, that Christ kind of told them if the Jews would just believe that he was the one the first time he came, that the prophet foretold Elijah in Elijah's spirit would have been John the Baptist, and he would have come back. But they didn't accept it. They didn't choose him. So that didn't happen. But now we're seeing that these two witnesses, one of them has to be Elijah because Elijah has to come back and prophesy. Okay, and they didn't choose that it was John the Baptist. Possibly could be John the Baptist come back too, but I don't think so. I think the actual prophet Elijah is going to come back. This is just me thinking. Now, I used to think for a very long time it was Enoch, okay, and not Moses, because even though he's going to be doing all of the plagues and stuff like that, the things Moses did, okay, well, Moses didn't do any of them. God did. Moses was just the article that God used to, but Moses would just say, this is what's going to happen because God had told him, and then God did it. So it doesn't matter what the prophet is, it's God that does it. Okay, but also I used to say it had to be Enoch because he didn't die. Okay, so let's go quickly to Hebrews chapter 9. One of the places we're going to run today. We can just stay right here in the New Testament. Go on up to Hebrews chapter 9, and this is the verse I used to use. Okay, and when I went studying it for this study today, okay, I learned something. It's Hebrews 9:27. And it says, and it is appointed unto man once to die, but after this, the judgment. And said, see, every man is appointed to die. Okay. Well, that's what it says, but I got funny looking at that and said, what does appointed mean? What is that word in the Greek? So you look it up in the Greek, okay? Do you know that word is only translated appointed once in the whole Bible, right here. Okay? Because what it really means, it's set. It's our destiny. It's where we expect to go. In other words, every man is expected to die. We know it. We're going to die. God told us it, and we're going to. It isn't that they have to die.
It's not a revelation. Yeah.
They're expected to. We expect it. We know it. It's appointed to die. Okay? What this verse is really trying to, what Paul's really trying to tell us is he's trying to knock out, okay, the teaching of reincarnation that was rampant in the new church. And he's telling them, no. It's appointed, man's destiny, okay, is usually to die. For once, we're going to die. But after this, what? Oh, we get reincarnated. Come back. No. The judgment. Okay, he's making it clear we don't keep rolling around and do better and better each time we come. No. He's trying to deny that. So here, I'm looking at it, doesn't say that he has to die. Also, if we go back in your Old Testament to Genesis, chapter 5, you will find, just like I said in 24, that it's going through the lineages of everybody through till Moses and Noah. And you'll find in verse 24, it's Enoch. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not. Okay? And what it means by he was not is he's always saying he lived 60-something years and then he died. All the rest of them, he says, and they lived so on 300 years and then they died. Okay? Except Enoch, it says, and he was not. In other words, he just wasn't there anymore. For God took him. Enoch went up to heaven with God. He did not die. Okay? According to the Genesis chapter 5, verse 24. Okay? But as far like I said, as far as I can see, he didn't have to. Okay? And the other big one that makes me sure who I think this is now is in Matthew, in Mark, in Luke. You'll find all of them when Christ is translated, they see him in his translated body. He's all cut in gold, white, so white they can barely look at him, and there's two people standing with him. They are Moses and Elijah. That's who they see. I think that's telling them that's who these two witnesses are going to be. It's going to be Moses and Elijah. They're coming back. That's why they're talking to Christ prior to his going away. And I think they're talking because They expect it to be still right, just like now. And it's not going to be. He's letting them know that they're not going to have the tribulation ain't going to start right after he goes back up and everything. What's going to happen? God's going to bring in the age of grace to the Gentile, and there's going to be, well, at least 2,000 years, because it's almost there now, that he's going to deal with Gentiles. And remember, that's something that was never foretold throughout the whole Old Testament. Or none of the prophets saw it, none of the apostles saw it. The only one that knew it was Christ, and he said things to make it so he wouldn't give away the secret, the mystery. It was given to who? Paul. Even Paul says, it's my gospel given to me by Jesus Christ himself. It was a mystery to everything. It's a secret. The only time Christ mentions any part of it, as we said before, the last two lessons, okay, where he says, I have another flock, okay, that shall come in. We shall all be one flock with one shepherd. Okay? That's the only hint he gives of Gentiles at all being in. Okay? Otherwise, there's nothing in the Old Testament, nothing in the Gospels, nothing at all about Gentiles getting anything. Okay? Why? Because it's just Paul's gospel given to Paul, and he states it in 2 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4. Okay? The death, burial, and resurrection, that's what we believe in. And by grace, nothing else. We don't get the law on us. Not like it's going to happen in the tribulation period. The law is going to come back. They're going to rebuild the temple. They're going to start doing the law again. Why? Because the Jews were never supposed to stop it. The only thing they don't have to do is they don't sacrifice a lamb every year for everybody's sin. Why? Because it's already been done. But they still bring their offerings. They still bring everything to the Lord. When they sin, they still bring a sin offering. It's their way of repenting. Like we're supposed to. We don't have to ask forgiveness. We just have to repent and turn away from it. Show God that we realize it's sin and move away from it. Okay? God's already forgiven us. Let's keep going. I go back to Revelations.
Isn't there a spots in the Old Testament that talk about a mystery?
Yes.
A prophecy?
No.
Okay.
Doesn't even mention it in any way whatsoever.
But is there a point to it being a mystery?
Yes. Very much so. It lets us realize that in Timothy, when Paul writes out to Timothy and says, to be a workman needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of God, okay, or the word of truth. Okay. What's he mean by that? Okay. Now, he couldn't have meant the Old Testament.
Find out the mystery yourself?
Yeah, no, he couldn't have meant the Old Testament, New Testament, because the Old Testament was all set and done already. And he's saying it as it's part of the New Testament, so it wasn't even written yet. What he's talking about is rightly dividing the two gospels. The gospel of the kingdom, preached by John the Baptist, preached by Jesus Christ, preached by all the apostles, even after his return. When he rose from the dead and came onto the apostles, what was the first thing they asked him? Lord, Lord, will thou now again return the kingdom to us? Okay? And Christ said, no, it's not for you to know the times and when. Okay? Because they expected the kingdom's coming back. That's all they all wanted from the beginning. He's going to set the kingdom. We're going to kick these Romans out. Okay? And it's going to be a great kingdom like it was with Solomon and David. Didn't happen. But that's what they expected because the Old Testament prophets told them all about it. Literally told about Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. Read Psalms 22. My goodness. Pierced in my hands and feet, lifted up high. They gambled for my garments.
So again, just like simply put, why did he?
That's the question. That's the question.
Obviously, he doesn't
That's
have the answer.
that's the question. That's the question.
Of the mystery.
That's correct. Great question, Tricia. Next week I'll get more into it, but I'll give you a hint now why. If the devil knew that by crucifying him, he would save the whole world, would the devil have done it? Would the devil have done it? No.
Yeah.
That's why it was a mystery. That's why it was kept secret. When the devil decided, crucify him, and they all got everyone to crucify him, they were glee, they were happy. Just like he says, for 3 days, just like we'll find out with these witnesses, for 3.5 days, they're going to be going, they're dead. I'm sure hell was cheering and wonderful when Christ was killed on the cross. They didn't accept him. 3 days he rose again. And in that resurrection came salvation.
That's partly why he
came salvation for the whole world.
Even
That's why it was a mystery.
like he gave them enough, but not enough.
Not enough. That's why the whole Old Testament, and he saw how God was dealing with man and the prophesying they were doing, his people, his chosen on earth. And he tried, how many times did they end up being dispersed because they fell into idolatry? Well, that's because the devil made sure they did. And God knew they were going to. But we'll see, like I said, next week we'll see a really great thing on that. All right, let's keep going. We're on Revelations. That was 5 and verse 6, of course, shutting up the power and having the plagues. And verse 7, and when they shall finish their testimony, the beast that ascended out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. Now, when you see the word the beast out of the bottomless pit, the first thought, of course, is that's Satan. Okay? But of course, every time they use the word beast in prophecy, it's usually a kingdom of some kind, a government of some kind, something that's established. So this could either mean, yes, the beast itself, the Antichrist, or the devil, okay, indwelled with the Antichrist, but he doesn't indwell him to the end of the first 3.5 years, and this goes on the first 3.5 years. Okay, or it could be that, remember it said that we built Rome, which I believe is the European Union. Somehow they will get an army together, go down there, and eventually kill these two witnesses after 3.5 years. Okay, let's keep going. The spit and their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city. Oh God, I'm reading 8 now because they killed them. I like this because remember I told you this whole thing is about what's going on in Jerusalem.
What
Okay?
chapter is it?
11. They're going on in Jerusalem. It says, and their bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. Now, they may be spiritually Sodom and Egypt because they're falling away and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, all that kind of stuff. But where was the Lord crucified? Israel, Jerusalem. That's what they're talking about. That's where this is taking place, in the city of Jerusalem. That's the only place he could measure the outside of the temple, all that stuff, where it's supposed to be. Okay. And so it was in Jerusalem. Okay. And then it says, 9, and they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3.5 days, and shall not suffer their bodies to be put in graves. So by 3 days, laying on the sun and everything like that, I think they're getting right. Okay, and they're not allowing them to go in and bury these people. They're rejoicing, they're doing the things. Look at 10. And they that dwell on the earth shall rejoice over them and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another. Oh, they're really having a gay old time. They're dead, they're dead. They're happy, they're dead. And shall not suffer their bodies to be put in graves. Okay, and then it says in 10, and they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice. I already did this because they dwell and torment them and all that kind of rejoice on the earth and make merry, shall give gifts one another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwell on the earth. Now 11, and after these days, after 3.5 days, I like how he still use the 3.5 again. It makes me kind of think maybe the Lord was in the earth 3.5 days. It says 3 full days, but maybe he took that half day before he came out, just like these guys have. Okay? And the spirit of life from God entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and a great fear fell upon them which saw them. Can you imagine? They've been rejoicing. It's so good. They're giving gifts back and forth. They're dead. They're dead. And then all of a sudden, the smell stops. The flesh heals. They stand on their feet, and they're standing before everyone. Yeah, of course, there was a great silence. Of course, they feared, oh my gosh, what have we done? Look what it says. And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, come up hither. And they ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. 13. In the same hour was there a great earthquake, and a 10th part of the city fell. And in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000. And the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. Now, as I've written a lot of things here and talked about it, we've already gone through Hebrews and Genesis. Okay? I'm stopping there because the rest of 11 talks about after this, which means they go into the next 3.5 years. And I don't want to do that. I want to kind of take it chronologically, like I said, and not take it directly from verse to verse because it'll get us confused. It jumps around so crazy. We don't understand what's going on. So I'm not going to do that, and I'm going to keep flipping these over and get to what I want. Also, if you notice the great earthquake in Jerusalem, Jerusalem and all of that area of the world sits on a fault line. So it's not uncommon for there to be earthquakes in Jerusalem, Israel, and that area of the world. What I do want to make clear is they've had so many earthquakes around there that the Sea of Galilee, first the Dead Sea is about 12,000 to 14,000 feet below sea level. So if that water at the edge of the Mediterranean Sea, if it ever crumbled some, it would fill the whole valley if it got in there. Because it's so far below sea level. You'd have a lake as big as one of the Great Lakes here in America. Okay? That's the Dead Sea is 12 to 1,400 feet below. The Sea of Galilee is 600 feet below sea level. That whole area, like I said, and you know, there's that whole river, the Jordan River, between the two. That whole area is somewhere between 12,000, 14,000 to 600 feet below sea level. So you can imagine when it talks about, we'll get to it in the Bible, where water comes out of the temple in Jerusalem and just floods the area, how much of a flood we're talking about. It's going to flood everything in that valley. I think it's going to flood the valley so bad that it'll run out all the way down through Egypt, Sinai, into the Mediterranean Sea. Okay? This water is just going to flood. It's going to clean out the Dead Sea so that fish are back in it and all that. This is going to happen. And it's going to happen because it's already sunk low enough that the water is just going to run down there. That's what's going to be happening.
Do you know the level of Florida?
No, not on the top of my head. I do know that the reason New Orleans flood, they have, what do they call them? They're like dams, but they're holding off something. Levees. They're holding off. They have levees because New Orleans is below sea level. And if they didn't keep those levees in place, and they found out that's why the whole freaking town flooded when they had the hurricane. The
levees
broke. Water broke, and the levees broke or overflow the levees, and it's all under sea level. The water just runs right in. Sorry. People shouldn't build things on places that are below sea level when you have water nearby. Okay. Now that we've finished chapter 11, like I said, we're going to do, let's quickly go back to chapter 7, because in chapter 7, we find more things that are happening in that first 3.5 years. And I want to get through all of that first before we go into the parts that are the second 3.5 years. It's easier to understand what's going on in Revelations when we study it this way. So if you go all the way back to chapter 7, we'll start with verse 1. And it says, and after these things, what things? Well, in chapter 6, at the very bottom, remember it says, and the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? It's talking about the mountains will fall on us and all that. In 6, if you remember, that's actually the last part of the 3.5 years, so we don't really want to care about that. Behold, when he opened the 6th seal, lo, there was a great earthquake, just like was in Jerusalem. That's the end of the first 3.5 years. This little part from 13 down, okay, is the second 3.5 years. We don't want to study that now. We want to go back. So after all this earthquake and everything like that, after the 7 is saying, after other things that have gone on have started, okay, he's going to start the 7-year tribulation. And they're talking about it's going to start then after the rapture comes and they're taken out. Now we're going to start our 7.5 years. I just went down here with the 7. Okay. In the first 3.5 years, okay, these things, remember, after these things, what? The rapture and all that happens. I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels, to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, okay, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Okay. Now this is going on in the first 3.5 years, when the 4 horsemen are coming, when we see what's going on in Jerusalem with the 2 witnesses. We're also going to have servants of God who are going to be sealed in their foreheads. And I heard the number, verse 4, and I heard the number of these which were sealed, and they were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Okay, and now 5 through 8, he goes through these tribes. Okay, of the tribe of Judah, 12,000. Of the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. Of the tribe of Gad, 12,000. Of the tribe of Asher was sealed, 12,000. The tribe of Nephilim, 12,000. The tribe of Manasseh, 12,000. Tribe of Simeon, 12,000. The tribe of Levi, 12,000. The tribe of Issachar, 12,000. The tribe of Zebulun, 12,000. Of the tribe of Joseph, 12,000, and the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000. Now, usually, what happens here is someone's going to bring up the part. Okay, now where is it? I got to find it right there. Someone's going to bring up the part that where's Dan and Manasseh? Because of the tribes, the real tribes, back in the Old Testament, Dan and Manasseh are chosen. Joseph isn't given, okay, and his son is instead, and Dan, of course, is given. Okay? So where are they? They're not listed here. The reason I believe they're not listed here, and it doesn't make people have twisted these verses so much to make what they want to say. Jehovah's Witnesses believe they're the 12,000 now. They're the 144,000 because the Jews lost their thing when they crucified their Lord. All of that is not what the Bible says. What does it say here? They're Jewish boys, young men, and they're coming from the 12 tribes. Why did they not admit? Why did they delete Dan and Manasseh? Well, Dan they deleted because that's the tribe that first went north and brought all the other tribes with them. And they were the first tribe to start building their own temples for their pagan wives to worship, was the tribe of Dan. So I think that's why God omitted them. Okay. Instead, he took on Levi, which is the priesthood tribe, which never gets any land or anything because they're the priesthood. But he lists them as part of coming out. The 12,000 is going to come out of Levi. Okay. They normally would not have come out of them because they're the priesthood. But I guess if you're going to be preaching the gospel of the kingdom, the priesthood's a good place to come from. So he's going to bring 12,000 out of there. Also, Manasseh is left out because they were also idolatrous and everything, but I think God just kind of puts them out and he calls Joseph, which wasn't there, which means Manasseh was Joseph's son. So by specifically denying that, any other tribes, people that came out of Joseph, they're going to go and be the 12,000 of them are coming and being there. I think God is leaving Manasseh out also because they were too idolatrous. And he's not going to allow them to be part of this 144,000. And the 144,000 are going to preach. Now, if we keep reading, I got to get out there, go to 9 now. And this I behold, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. And remember now, all the multitude, they couldn't even be numbered and all that. Remember, we saw this in verse 6 too, then that were under the temple. Okay? And they saw, who are these people? And he told them, those that were crucified or those that died during the tribulation period. Here they are again, a whole multitude of people, palms in their hands, and cried with a loud voice, saying, salvation to our God, which sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb. And all the angels cried. Now, what's going on here? Well, 7 through 9, we see what happens when the 144,000 actually go out and start doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's 144,000 Jewish boys, Jewish men, young men are going to go out and preach the gospel of the kingdom. Okay? Not the gospel of grace, the gospel of the kingdom. Okay? To Jews. But there's going to be Gentiles that hear it. There's going to be Jews that hear it. There's going to be all these people that are going to hear this for the first time. And they're going to get saved. Most of them are going to get saved, okay, and are going to be murdered for their faith almost immediately. They're going to be killed. And most likely, almost every Gentile will be. Very few are going to go in. Okay? But of course, they're going to be part of, at the end of the whole tribulation period, the remnant, that small part of people still in this flesh that are going to go into the kingdom. They believe by faith that Christ was the Messiah and Christ was coming back to set up his kingdom. That's all they have to believe. Okay? They're going to be probably changed to Judaism. They're going to get circumcised. They're going to do everything that a Jew should do. Okay? And they're going to go in. This happened even in the Old Testament. My best version of that is Jericho.
Rahab.
It's Rahab, yes. As the harlot in Jericho, where the men run and she hides him up on the roof with the throngs. Yes, she's. If you check back in the New Testament in Matthew, she's in the lineage of Christ. Okay, here she was basically the mistress of a whorehouse. Okay, she gets saved, becomes a Jewish woman. Okay, has a husband, and is in the lineage. God uses her in the lineage of Christ. It just goes to show it doesn't matter what you are outside; it's inside that counts. Your heart and your devotion to God. What God does to you cleanses you, and then what happens with you. God can still use you, and He uses Rahab. We keep going on. We'll find that these are them that were listened to, saw that, like I said, and almost immediately were killed. Okay? And the angels stood around about the throne and about the elders and the four beasts before them the throne and worshiped God, saying, "Blessed is the God." Am I in? No, I'm in. Yeah, 7. Okay, we're good. So, and 12. And blessed, glory, wisdom, thanks, honor, and power and might be unto our God forever and ever. Amen. 13. And one of the elders answered, saying unto me, What are these which are arrayed in the white robes, and whence came they? Now, this goes to show that John isn't as smart as I thought he was. Okay? Because he was just told the ones under the altar, which was just a few he'd seen yet, okay, were those martyred in the okay. But he doesn't, he tells the and one of the others saying unto me, which one? He said, and I said unto him, but sir, thou knowest. Well, John should know too. He already saw in Remember in verse 6, 9 through 11 too, we saw those that wander, and verse 11 even said that they are, he tells them, wait until our fellow servants and our brethren join us, are going to join you. That's what he says in 6. So the 3.5 years isn't over yet. So there's going to be more of them. And near the end of it, I think a whole bunch are going to flock toward God, okay, and flock towards the Lord. Okay? All because of the witnesses preaching in Jerusalem that everyone's going to see on their probably newscasts every single night, and the 144,000 Jewish men that are going to be preaching throughout the whole world. But what I like about that is it called them, remember I said this just last week too, the servants and brethren. Okay? The reason it calls them that, to this day, us as Christians, when you go to church, everyone, the kids used to, and even the old men used to, when they spoke to me or talked to me, they'd say, Brother Ron, okay, we're brethren. Okay? Maybe not physically, but spiritually, we're brothers. Okay? And all the kids to this day, I'll go to a supermarket in Bushnell and walk up to do something at Walmart, and the kid is standing, this young man is standing at the check. So we'll look over him and say, Brother Ron! And I have no idea who he is. Okay? Realizing, he knows me either from junior church or from the teen youth, but he's grown so old, so much, I have no idea who this kid is. And they'll look at me and realize in my face, I'll say, oh, and they realize I don't know them. And they'll laugh and say, it's so-and-so. And I'll say, oh, wow, man, look at you. They still remember me, still know me as Brother Ron, okay? Because that's what they knew me when we were in church at that time. Okay? That's this here. Servants with them are going to be, remember, this is Jews. So their brethren are fellow Jews that has accepted it. Okay? But when God says there's going to be fellow servants, that means there's Gentiles that are also now saved by this gospel of the kingdom and are preaching it to others, this gospel of the kingdom. They're fellow servants of God. They're not brethren because they're not Jews. Okay? But they're going to be here. Okay? That lets me know I used to believe that, every Gentile is going to die. No, they're not. They're going to be part of this remnant. Okay? Now, either they're going to die for their faith, because most of them will, but some of them are going to make it to Jerusalem, where the Jews are being protected, and God's going to protect them. And when they finally, the whole thing is over, and Christ comes down and sets up the kingdom, They're going to walk in the kingdom still in this flesh, just like we're in. And God's going to deal with them after 1,000 years. God will go back and deal with them. So 13, and one of the elders saying, which are they? And he said, Sir, 14 thou knowest. Okay. And he said unto me, These are they which came out of great tribulation, just like before, okay, and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And we're going to stop right there, because to go any further would take us out of the first 3.5 years in verse 7 here. So we're not going to go back to it. We'll come back to that when we get out of the first 3.5 years. Okay. So next week, I'll let you know where we're going. I do believe we're going to be going to 8 and starting that, and we'll go back to the 7, back in 11, in chronicle order, to look what's going on in the last 3.5 years. So until next week, see you later.